I'm constantly being reminded that I actually have a criminal behavior to report over the principal imperial bloodline, and that is why I am reaching United Nations here initially, and then I kind of could have not stopped talking. But the thing is that I reached United Nations initially because I am reporting the case, and that is Jesus bloodline hunted, targeted, excavated, and used for money generation or self-promotion. So whenever you end up talking about me in such way, Ireland and anyone else, we are not good. Whenever you start talking like that about this entire event, we are not good. First of all, you have to understand that I am talking about mixed imperial bloodline to which you would relate, and regretfully you have been found relating to it in wrong way. So that is the starting point from where we need to start today in order that you wash out from your sins. In order to get washed, which you are not yet, neither you are being forgiven because legal system doesn't function like that. You will need to be acknowledged how you are positioned right now, and that it is not on you now to declare, to decide where and how this relationship is going to go. Because we talk about violation that involves other people as well, you're not going to draw the line here. You will understand your position. Just because something is so big doesn't mean that it is not solvable. It means that you need a bigger person to solve it. When something is so big, that means you need big person to solve it. It doesn't mean it's not solvable, because this universe doesn't work like that. In this universe, there is always counterpart for everything. The universe exists in perfect balance. And the balance exists on the principles of two halves into one something. If there are two sides to something, then there are two sides to something. When there is offense, it is involved another side as well. You don't go away deciding on your behalf only. Let's keep that on mind. And that's not just only Ireland, but everyone else on the planet. On some kind of political levels. And in that respect, it's very hard to talk about any other nation within some kind of independent status where they are all equally members in United Nations. But when they go in United Nations, they kind of pretend they don't know what's happening here. United Nations is event where we talk about the behavior of nations on the planet. Not on the Mars, but on this earth. That is what United Nations is, a building where we talk about how each of the member states behave on the planet and in regard of planetary matters. I'm going to find therefore equally inappropriate that I define as some nation, and then I end up and I give to that nation possibility to blackmail any others because of the wrongdoing. That is why, as of today, I disassociate myself from standing on position of any nation, but rather as United Nations Counseling Office, to the extent that I belong to mixed breed, mixed bloodline. It's not going to be impossible to be like that. To the extent that my kids are also first generation immigrants, it is equally not going to be hard for them to play United Nations related without attaching too much to any of the nations, either the previous that they can hardly relate to, or the new that continue to see them as someone else's kids. Accordingly, holding ourselves as less defined by any national identity when it comes to this particular event is equally possible. Which means that no nation is generating rights to blackmail other nation on this ground. Because I'm talking about mixed bloodline, imperial mixed bloodline. It also means that it is happening also in boundaries of any nation. It is happening as such event, as nation violating mixed bloodline. Many nations obviously would not find, especially in previous times, would not find that that much disputable, discriminating people like that. The problem is that we talk here about bloodline that is reflected on any single flag. And that is why I have called you today to look at the colors of your flag and understand properly who are the principal tribes on your territories, because they would be reflected on that flag, which means that you can't discriminate the color that is on your flag, because it would not make any sense. If that color is constitutional color, you can't possibly discriminate it. Of course, it will need to be also recognized, because people are not that much stupid, especially when think about higher political matters. What kind of identity they would be referring in their flag to? Because these would be constitutional identities. And you cannot end up violating a constitutional identity in your nation. We are right there, therefore. Remember, you can't end up violating constitutional identity of your flag-related national identity. And political, for that matter. And political. Because these words should actually stand and mean something. I'm going therefore there with two of my kids, because I'm going there as a bloodline, as a Ark of Covenant, as a Holy Grail. Athens, you have been acknowledged. My verdict for today. Despite the fact that it is returning me to Israel, it is returning me to Israel that doesn't exist anymore, because that Israel was ground zero at the time when Crusaders took Ark of Covenant. And the fact why Ark of Covenant needed to run away was because Israel at that point of time was ground zero, made ground zero by Crusaders. It is, however, mixed bloodline. I'm not pushing away Palestinians. I'm going to, however, find obstacle Muslim religion. I'm going to find Muslim religion as an obstacle, and I'm going to notice that Muslim religions, it seems, took over the Ark of Covenant to their side. And maybe that is why they are being punished today that much. I think the main reason is because they have took Ark of Covenant to their side all the way, and that is why Israel is happening. England is happening as Elizabeth rather than as Mary. This continues to be main reason for this entire confusion. We were also confusing because I certainly find myself prevailing on yellow side, and I have chosen yellow side as my some kind of, I can't say someone that can take over what I do, but maybe as my platform, as my developer, as a house to which I bring my work. Standing in Macedonia rather than in Serbia indicate that as well, that I likely prevail on my mother's side, in this case being Palestinian-backed identity. But my mother does have very strong Russian, Nordic presence actually. Which is also obviously that Nordic Jewishness actually, via Russian Romanov's protocol. In any case scenario, things are quite mixed, and I'm going to find as the most heaviest element still the fact that Palestinians have accepted Muslim religion. For me, that is huge obstacle. And also I will notice a reason why history went like that, and why we have that much Muslims now on the West. I think the things have been overdone here from Muslim behalf. And in that regard, I can't say solution by people continuing to drive this. Well, it is about me, my identity, my freedom, my existence, and my work. So I'm going to ask you to stop thinking of this event as it is something in your hands, belongs to you, and you have a right to it. You don't. Because we talk about human protocol here, protocol human. So you don't have such rights. You don't have rights to be stronger than me in this entire situation. You don't have that right. I do not have right to blackmail me as well, or to hold my kids as hostages. You don't have right for that as well. To look after them as some kind of distant cousins, there is a moral ground to that. But to blackmail them like that, to blackmail situation by using them hostages, you can't accept that. We can't accept that. So, the best you can do is to understand that this is my case now, not yours. And it will need to be resolved how I am going to find resolvable. Which means, of course, getting my freedom getting back freedom for us, for me and the bloodline, getting our freedom. Accordingly, relating to bloodline, to mixed bloodline, is going to be criteria for assessing the behavior of various nations, how they are going to relate to mixed bloodlines. The other day it has been pointed again, Pakistan. Pakistan is country of mixed bloodline. There is India bloodline and Muslim bloodlines that are crossing in Pakistan, because India is not Muslim country. And the rest of the countries, as developed further northern, are Muslims. So you have here on territories that would exist as some kind of zone between two worlds, you would have plenty of mixed bloodlines. So one reason why the main reason why you would have such a degree of violation in Pakistan is because of the mixed bloodlines. It has been also established that Muslims are more aggressive when it comes to violation of human rights of non-Muslim population. Traditionally, we notice in Europe is equally like that. So Muslims today will need to be judged on that account. That is certainly going to weaken positions of Palestinians. But this is not going to be only about Palestinians. It is that we need to monitor the entire Muslim world in terms of expressing stronger aggressiveness when it comes to violation of human rights. That is not going to give me either stronger position to Mary of my character versus Elizabeth of my character. And I have been right when I found Macedonia as closer to criteria of being my house than Serbia, which means that Elizabeth in my character prevail. But main reason would be not Muslims but Macedonians. Muslims I measure via Serbia, much more present, therefore would be much more present in my definition of Mary, because in my country the father and mother are Serbia and Macedonia, and Serbia is closer to Muslim world. No, Macedonia is certainly equally close to Muslim world, but I think in Macedonia you find a certain percent of restriction in the way how probably it is harder to find it in real Serbia, on the one that would not be yellow. If it is yellow Serbia, it would be therefore yellow protocol, which would know in certain percentage how to stand against someone overtaking the situation too much. I have impression, therefore, that Serbs are known very much as fighting Turks, and Muslims, actually, as well, are known as big fighters, bigger than Macedonians probably. I don't know, it is perceived that now Serbia is a more democratic country and willing to open doors to whoever, while Macedonia isn't forced to be taken over. It's more like Macedonia is still playing some kind of more Nazi-related blonde color, but then it's not succeeding being like that. Reality is that both territories have quite a mixed bloodline among the Muslim population as well. And that become obstacle, because especially when you need to bring this case where you need to recognize who is driving the violation to greater account out of the two houses, Serbia and Macedonia, and Israel versus Palestine. Although one would say, well, Palestine, obviously, because of that Muslim aggressiveness, would be more violating the bloodline, the mixed bloodlines. Fact is that Jewish people are the one that officially are making much more money out of it in some kind of institutionalized way. They have brought all of that within the institutions. And I can't see that is any better position. As much as Palestinians have brought it in a masonry order, which is equally, to great an extent, institutionalizing the problem. So both of them are to be equally addressed for long terms of institutionalizing a principal violation, that is violation of a principal imperial bloodline of the planet. Nothing is going to be easier position of Serbia and Macedonia. So to go out there and continue to talk about trading, either you're in Russia or you're in China or you're on our territories, especially on our territories, it's going to be inappropriate. As long as we do not clarify that on this planet, the diversity has been marketized and has become used as a ground for making profit and economy. Biodiversity has become, and cultural diversity has become ground on which the economy of this planet is making money. Nations today more and more talk as oligarchs rather than as political leaders. And regretfully, where socialism went today is tribunal society based on tradings. That is my prognosis is real. That is where socialism was heading, and it was very easy for socialism to get on that next stage because of what they have done in last century, and that is cleaning out their territory from intelligence and aristocracy and bourgeoisie. Accordingly, let's not forget, these are the structures that continue to sit in political chairs in China and in Russia. And I can possibly give that much credit to what appeared to be my biggest opposition. And that is tribunal society, which today holds the crown in Russia and in China. And of course, they can't stop talking about trading while holding their monarchy family in exile in Taiwan. Here it is where I'm going to find the West having certain ground that can at least bring more sanity, I would hope. Not a West that would be equally spoiled in all of the previous regard, but a West that would find moral ground to recognize what happened in previous century, and that I do not here defend the system that is capitalism, but I certainly defend the people and what they have been standing for, or what they stand for in terms of especially when I talk intelligence and creative people of intelligent, sensitive creativity, I'm going to call it. People of sensitive, creative nature. Today have been targeted and have been used for trading purposes. So what I'm saying is that I'm going to find much more alignment still on the West side, because on the West side you still can find such people. string still more empowered than how you would find them in China, I'm afraid, in China and in Russia. I think that China and Russia have become strong totalitarian regimes. That is what happened in socialism. Again, I'm going to say by criticizing capitalism, I cannot support socialism, because socialism, the way how it happened as oppressive regime. I certainly have no intention to support something like that. I mean, I'm going to find much more my socialism present in Europe, where there is strong social sentiment, and then we need to criticize how far capitalism can go away with. That is, we need to regulate capitalism. I'm going to find, that is much more doable, or more even reasonable, amending capitalism and naturally reaching next stage by amending what we don't want, rather than jumping into oblivion as it has happened with socialism. Let's not use that reference. That word is not fair to Tom Cruise. Then jumping into totally new order, which also is regime aligned order, and then expect to find better answer there, which is absurd. And also working with the working class ahead, or without working class, even if it is intelligence today, it's still very much controllable, regime driven. And that's always going to be problem with running society in such a way. If you end up not with a state, but you end up with oligarchs, which is not any different situation in capitalism. Actually, they happen to be oligarchs because they accepted capitalism. What they have accomplished on these territories is artificial centralization of power by using capitalism and returning that artificial empowering to the ground, which might be due to occupying a territory as well. I mean, when you occupy a territory, you would be having like that. You would be controlling it from one center. That's controlling a territory, which might easily be occupied territory as well. I'm going to find that's happening in Spain, that's happening in Russia, it's happening in China. They may easily be understood even as occupied territories. That is what happens when you reach that level of centralized governance, right? That is why we don't like it. However, capitalism is not free from any of such development via capitalism. So what that means? It means that we have to look at both of the systems, equally as we look in any of the human, having their extreme position. And we need to regulate so we can avoid such extreme situation to happen, to take place. When the power gets centralized, and where wealth becomes centralized, and when become a matter of demonic forces taking over the planet as negative forces, because they know they're negative, and therefore they continue to grow as a negative disaster. And then it's power. Of course, the question here that I'm going to question today would be why you're doing it, why you accept to drive the humanity in such direction, why you accept to be compromised. And the answer would be obviously because people in many cases are being stuck into something, gradually lured into something, and now have become slaves to the regime. The regime does have enormous percentage of slaves. And also second reason would be that there are biodiversity on the planet that continue to believe that the only way of them to get ahead is to be criminals, because they don't have time to wait, or they don't want to wait, or they don't understand how it should be working, so they think it is about them waiting something. but they continue to think that that's their problem and it is upon them to decide and to act, which is predatory stage of humanity altogether. Therefore, rotten criteria continue to take the place of building the planet. And third reason would be that you have real biopolarization that simply wants to keep things under control, and that would be Nazism, fascism, things like that. These are three forces, and it can go both ways. It can go extremism both ways. You have Nazism, fascism on the white side, and you have this kind of Muslim destructive approach. It is equally Muslim fascism and Muslim Nazism in Muslim format. It is not happening just in white format, it's happening in Muslim format as well. Or it is biodiversity format that's like creaturehood, biodiverse creature format. Would be third category of reasons. That is why it is far left or far right. It's far. It's more extreme. But that's certainly good reason, one reason for all of that as well. And these events coexist. Either you willingly accept to build the system, knowing what kind of system you're building, but you're opportunistic and you're economically savvy, and you don't give them about anything else, and you're very proud of what you're doing, and you think you're clever and things like that, and you don't take any kind of political responsibility or any kind of responsibility for the consequences of your behavior. There's like Disneyland protocol. I'm going to call it Disneyland protocol or child protocol. As reason one. Reason two is people stuck as slaves in this, lured from little kids, especially immigrants would come in that category. Things like that. Second situation. And third situation, bio-extremism as fascism, Nazism, where it is not believing in just in economy, but in the political system that is, either you can call it oppressing others, or in substance they're not oppressing others, they're promoting their principal position, but then it comes as oppressing others. So in good way, this last protocol is what I am promoting. Now, yesterday someone was talking about reservation, but she can be associated with speaking about Eva Peron. They found convenient to connect with that character. Why they would connect with Statue of Liberty when they can connect to Eva Peron? Ireland. Why Ireland would notice Statue of Liberty when they can notice Eva Peron? So Eva Peron was having an alignment with Nazism. Now hear me well here. In which category of these three I belong? My work. Because these are negative references to negative behavior, in none. But if I take the negative attachment, if you just notice these three categories population as different category of groups of population, that is economic, driven by economy, mixed bloodlines, globalization protocol in general. These are globalists, right? Second group, slaves to the regimes, slaves to the economy system, immigrants, first generation immigrants usually, so-called disposables. Or third category, which is standing as ideological protocol, cultural protocol, and then driving on the warrior side. I would rather say it rather than killer side or ugly, miserable, sex, notorious, attacking, killed kids position. If I define my position not economically driven, not accepting to be some idiotic blackmailed slave, I would be closest to third category. Not because I'm Nazi, but because I am not economically driven globalist, because I don't accept to be blackmailed on immigrant status. Pay attention. Because I'm not opportunist driven by economic profit and nothing else. Because I'm not going to accept to play idiot immigrant. I am not going to accept to be Nazi just because you are short in comprehension or understanding the positions or the category of population in a given national format. I would protect national protocol driven on the parameters of the flag. I would be resisting too much of immigrants, and I would be insisting on playing national economy. Now you tell me which part is not correct and which part you're not aligned with as we speak, but very ready now to throw on me the Nazi title, especially someone as Ireland. That's rather being laughable. Ireland talking about Nazism as third party. I'm not going to be judged by Ireland on anything. So hold your breath. It's not, first of all, what I have chosen. Personally, that's not going to color me that much personally, as we are actually reasoning here as a reasonable grown-up human population, and we are detecting out of this situation that I am and patterns of behaving out there, which we as a grown-up people, which one we are going to accept as the most correct socio-political approach. And I know which one you are going to accept. The only one that you can possibly accept. And everything else is simply not acceptable. Now, the only question is that we should not drive things into extreme. But it's much easier to deal with situation when you know that you are standing on the correct positions. When you are standing on all of the wrong positions, then you babble nonsense about doing things correctly. Or you are doing nothing of correct. But while you are not defined correctly, let's say doing things correctly. You're using immigrants as slaves. You're using opportunism in some kind of global investment approach. That is, you are supporting economy. You don't give them what they're doing and how they behave in international terms. You are promoting internationally various states. You don't give a damn what kind of states they are, as supporting Israel, supporting, I don't know, where is the right-wing regimes wherever in the world, using money as the main criteria, right? Well, you would be losing any right to say anything further. Or you have an opinion. And then you have also an opinion. Seriously. Plus you have an opinion. And then it's being justifiable. So we don't need United Nations on this. Because you have sorted it out. No, you haven't actually. Actually, you haven't. You continue to produce slaves out of immigration kids. You continue to drive decision-making on economic, opportunistic manner. Sacrificing or trading off or trying to look the other side when it is in question any kind of extreme behavior on the territories, as long as you're driven by the profit making. You're not going to be criteria deciding on first account about this planet on anything whatsoever. That is where we are. If you're not political, as Warren Buffett is not political, well, then it's not political. Well, nobody is going to walk and talk first and decide on anything. Or there is a wartime or some kind of disaster, these people are not going to speak first on anything. And their money probably will be confiscated for the purposes of national interest. Yes, that's how that goes. We're going to have army of angry kids out there that you have been blackmailing. It's going to go after their neck to the day they live, to the last day of their life. They'll be going after your stupid neck. That's that situation as well. And there's only one force that can win, the one that makes reason. That's where we are right now, Artians. Therefore, I'm bringing all of this in United Nations. And you have an opinion, give me a break. I'm the one speaking 15 years and you're most of the time listening. Now you're going to come forward with opinion? No, you have not been graduating. And one that is not graduated cannot give that much of opinion on my work, on what I still continue to call my work. Like you have been Ireland, we have been listening. Now we are going to decide. Certainly not. No, you are going to be certified. No, you are going to be marked. You have been listening, and now you will be marked. And that is what is the meaning of United Nations. By the way, you don't go there as owner. You get there as when you're going in amphitheater. As audience. Because the narrator is United Nations. I think it's much more fair to bring that chair where it is Macedonians, because Olymp in substance is exactly that. And I really don't have time to wait for you to agree how that should happen, when actually it does exist. It is much more easier for me to just declare my chair in more correct terms than to live in the clouds. So it is time that I switch my introductory, my principal picture from Olymp to United Nations. And we understand the situation in more serious terms. Each of the nations to accept that today the entire planetary system exists on the principles of violating principal imperial bloodline of planet Earth. Now I understand, as I understand, something with kids is going on. Nations decided to bring more kids within the category of mixed bloodline. I don't know, was it the expectation so they will have the right to shareholding of the planetary cake? So they will have a cake that they can sharehold. What that means? That means people that they are going to use to grow for exploitation purposes, for money-making purposes. Now that is how far that collective primitivism and collective primitive madness can go. I'm going to find, therefore, a reason, I'm going to notice a reason why I'm going to say today Russia and China, despite the gloriousness of the size of the territories, the downfall would be that they exist on the positions of prime societies. They have ended today to think as a prime society, not as a intelligence, not as a character, not as a sainthood, but as hardly educated paysan or gang, therefore gang opportunist that have ground zero level of moral criteria, exist as some kind of predator, literally. And we are not talking here some kind of extraterrestrial sitting out there behind these chambers and being opportunistic. No, these are not the bio extraterrestrial situation. We are talking here about prime Earth population. I am speaking in many occasions that I don't even believe in extraterrestrialism. I think that they are talking about terrestrialism, a biodiversity on the planets, rather. Because accepting human protocol in such kind of clean, neat, and organized manner would probably find in corners variety of by alternative positions. There is probability that certain species would stay out of the principal description, and it must be a very terrific. It must be very discriminatory. It must be very wrong, actually. So certainly we will need to be confronted with such criteria. I mean, discriminating alternative bioforms to human just because they don't look like a human. How far most of us are going to find that making that much of a sense? If they bring intelligence of a human, if they bring a level of intelligence on the human level, it is not acceptable, because we have established here that criteria is basically intelligence, and human is higher species, not because they have like gorillas, one vertical point auto spine might be a reason why someone decided to pull out human, and in good part of the human history it was not intelligence, not that much of a obvious event. Someone to say, oh, intelligence is why human is distinctive. Obviously, in earlier times, it was just the spine that was making human really to be a human. And most of the people obviously have been using that criteria in earlier times to distinct human and drive that human as a species. And that element of beauty we notice here also is getting on surface, but not intelligence. I think it is a later event that we have become aware that actually human is also distinctive from animals because of the size of human intelligence. I mean, until yesterday, people have been willing to speak much more about God, Jesus, and the saints as intelligent beings, and then human would be like Nambi. It's not like that anymore. I'm just realizing that intelligence has become a recent criterion rather than earlier for protocol human. And it might be a reason why, because it has been driven everything on the level of vertical spine, and let's call it beauty in terms of certain kind of standard valuation criteria, would certainly bring certain, I would assume, would bring certain species of intelligent nature. There is probability, although it is very hard to speak about intelligence as organic event, but then it's intelligent. The way how we understand intelligence is educated approach, and intelligence require organizational attitude to great an extent. Only when we become much more organized species, we reached intelligence, when we manage to notice intelligence. Intelligence is a factor of being more organized and orderly and disciplined and things like that. And which means at earlier stages you don't find any of it, and as a result you don't find enough of intelligent approaches. So it is hard to speak about the rest of the species as more intelligent, but we might talk about capacity to being equally intelligent, and then being discriminated because of not exactly having the principal criteria applied on the ground. Think about that. That is where we are going, and when ultimately at some point of time we are going to reach that destination. But today we are much more bothered with the human itself, on the fact that there is a phenomena of they're still gathering something on the central plateau here, and that is that biodiversity, and that is the fact that we, especially it's happening in Orthodoxy, because Orthodoxy is celebrating Easter with different colored eggs. And now everyone brings their, obviously, the kids, because they want to make that kind of big cake, that then they are going to have right to use and misuse. It looks to me as a notorious. How can someone think about something like this? It's not genius or something. It is, one can think, wow, it looks like a genius, but it is so negative, so you can't call it genius, because genius will need to be positive. It is geniusly negative. How on earth someone could have think about something so disgusting? And it is even harder to answer how one can continue thinking like that. It must be that there are still very disgusting people crawling on the ground. Although, when you think of kids, you can't call kids like that. Kids are just little and afraid. And maybe in these grown-up people, there are still sitting little and afraid kids. Because we just grow up, but we never stop being the previous. We all bring with us that little child we have been, no matter how old we are. And that attitude, therefore, now that you have found some kind of holy grail, and you jump over it like creatures, rather than waiting for a sainthood out of there. You jumped as saints yourself, right? In order to become saints yourself, you jumped over real saints like creatures. However, to the extent that everything falls as a blame to little group of people called Maoris of New Zealand, and everyone seems in intention to fly away from responsibility, although it is much more centered somewhere in Japan, or somewhere in China, or somewhere in Russia, or somewhere in Middle East, or somewhere in all of the headquarters of the previous, all over the West world, that continue to be as little kids, as I have said, very much excited about continuing to play little kids waiting for gifts from Santa Claus. I think we should be rather focusing on Santa Claus for beginning of the story. And as their Maoris would be therefore rather hunted for their genetics than other way around. And that is what they have been complaining to me as well, that they are the ones that have constantly been submitted to constant gynecological examination. I mean, also, of course, I have to notice my own construct. And if hunting for or looking for the one responsible is going to bring me closer to my DNA temples, I'm going to question the rationale of the entire operation. Are you going to tell me that my sister is going to go as a winner here, left to continue to be on the clouds of its parasitism and imbecilism and pretense of playing God or being idiot? Well, it's unfortunate that you could have not found better example to play my sister, but that's your problem, not mine. The Society of Blue Men, that's your problem. If you have not been so much preoccupied with playing a lover boy in last century, maybe you would have better results. Can anything be more stupid than locking yourself in a chamber with another man as a lover boy and now expecting for the top of the hierarchy? Excuse me? It's rather your lunacy we need to talk about. How easy you have been driven and how easy you have allowed to be played down. They have just played you down. They just put you away. And you just accepted it. And they continue to serve you with information of what, all the way to Italy. Look where your Maggie is now. Look how your Maggie looks now. And here they're pulling to Richard Chamberlain, some kind of very unattractive woman. So he is going to be explained how woman looks like he cannot see a woman in out there in the outer world. But he allows someone to give a woman to Richard Chamberlain. That is the society in which we live. This society is dealing with who is going to be love partner to Richard Chamberlain people of the planet. And I somehow think all of a sudden I noticed the sabotage, a conspiracy going on here. Rather than his decision making. I don't think that it is only his decision making to be blamed. I think that he was brought into a corner. I think that that these people continue to be very much outcasted on the planet because they are too beautiful and the rest of the men would stand no chance with them. So they usually end up sabotaging them. They push them aside because they're too good looking. For the same reasons, for the same reasons, women are pushing them, although not exactly for the same reasons. Women push such men because they're afraid not to be hurt by another woman. Of course, if it is in question at that level of woman. Although for any man should be a woman, so there should be a woman that should be looking as equally that great, so it will be balanced to quite an extent. And there will not be such kind of fear. In any case scenario, females can also experience it when they look too good. Then men become afraid of them, and they end up being married with some kind of alternative so they can be much more mind peaceful. That is what makes a beautiful man and beautiful woman very unfortunate. Very, very absurd, isn't it? Absurd, rather. I mean, it's time that humanity stop being over defensive, but in question very good looking people. My point being, these people continue to be targeted and downgraded and downplayed into some kind of homosexualism because the rest of the people see them as a competition. So there is no such thing as Richard Chamberlain is a gay. There is no such thing as gay. When someone looks as a physically normal male, driven by male hormones person, I mean, it's all hormonical. If he prevails on hormonical side as a male, it means he is male, it means he is perfectly healthy person. There is no need to serve him with ugly woman. Serve him with beautiful woman. With a woman of a character. For God's sake. Be proper, normal, healthy society. For once in your life. Forever in your life. Stop punishing people for looking beautiful and good. Stop punishing humanity from being the best of. And stop rewarding misery, and the one that already have become dependent on your management skills. Leadership is not that. Leadership will never be that. Leadership will never be a little box that you are going to put in your pocket. You have understood this entire universe, this entire notion of humanity, and practical human for that matter, in very wrong way, and you would not have right to decide on any of these matters anymore. So as I started therefore talking about New Zealand being targeted, it is, let's clarify, it is true that I found certain species that are similar to what later becomes Sunnis and Shias in Middle East. The point is, as they have said, as New Zealand equally have said, the point is that they have been, I mean, it's very easy. I mean, obviously, equally as it is happening in on Antarctica as we speak. People come from different places of the planet to colonize certain lands. And then it happens there what it happens. And it happened what it happened, I'm going to argue. To great an extent is because in last century, British and Germans have been traveling in this direction. Also, we have become very much aware that it was Britain majorly, and with their European allies, that have been controlling Middle East in last few centuries of time. Especially in last centuries. In last millennium, let's say. Middle East have been heavily controlled by Roman imperialism, by Western forces that never left Middle East. Western forces never left Middle East. Middle East continued to be occupied zone. Now to talk about what New Zealand was doing there, it was rather what imperial forces have been doing there, rather, I would argue, than locals of New Zealand that continue to be equally occupied, as we would all know, continue to be occupied natives, as are Aborigines in Australia. There's very little ground why someone would be blaming these people for their earlier behavior. But even if that is the case, I really can't accept that going far too much on their side, as I'm enclosing case of Richard Chamberlain, and I have just noticed on television how far everyone on the planet was engaged to keep these people, or another example would have been Alan Dillon, to keep these people solidly off the stage, under control. So Alan Dillon was kind of stigmatized by some kind of affair with mafia, while and he never got out of that shade. I mean, it certainly put people away from your life. Also, as we understood now, he was rather targeted than a being of that nature. Also, he was playing cold character because he was having very unhappy childhood. He was actually resented by his parents, and it has nothing to do with mafia world. But we have been perceiving him exactly like that character, and people would keep distance from him. That's enough to isolate people and to stigmatize them for life. And it has not to do much with Maoris. Or another example, the case of Richard Chamberlain. I can see how much people are collectively, especially business industry, media, business industry, are very much targeting these people. And that is very much centerpiece of the entire planetary affair, and how planet has been managed by the mainstream events which are surrounding the house of Israel for 2 millenniums. Again, I'm not going to bring it that far as to New Zealand. I think we are over-targeting New Zealand. New Zealand has been over-targeted. It is true that I noticed increased movement on the level of tribunal societies. It is true that I noticed that monarchy of England does have elements of Maori references, although I would be shooting in my foot there, obviously. But still, I insist on imperial subjects. Anyway, I noticed tribunal gathering. I noticed a monarchy of England going somewhere more native rather than regulatory. I noticed socialism returning on grand scale towards tribunal society. It was the most logical the person of my caliber is going to find worthy pointing on these momentums. But I have not been rushing too much to accuse anyone on this as much as I have been rather alerting on certain momentums. And for that much of a stake that New Zealand equally would have in maintaining tribunal culture untouched for millenniums, I would continue to insist that they have earned fair share of assessing the overall behavior and overall situation. But I would not agree to blame only New Zealand for this entire situation of how tribunal societies have been behaving and continue to behave on the planet, which is rather planetary situation. You have tribunal societies, especially still very much strong order in Central Europe. And it didn't take too much that they bring their nicely plait blonde hair again on top of their head, starting with the Tomashenko, I think it was, I don't know what was her name, something like that, first president of Ukraine, before all of this mess started, and no one even has mentioned her. But let's notice that that march it was very easy to bring that tribunal march in Central Europe. And all the way to Australia and Assange marching there, I saw that as returning to neo-Nazism. But it was easy to return to neo-Nazism because it was easy to return in Central Europe to tribunalism, to tribunal behavior. In Middle East, most of the tribe, most of the population is not out of it at all. Africa is certainly very, very close to that. South America is certainly very close to that. So why on earth just New Zealand? Why only New Zealand? I think it was much more actually Central Europe to be blamed. Although they continue to work very closely with New Zealand on all of the above. As I have said, it is always about drawing fine line between I wouldn't call it white and black, but I'm not that much of a colorful person either. I don't insist on very strong colors, or like, for example, South Americans. I don't know how much in Spain people, probably the aristocratic level is much more on subtleness. Regular people want to put all of the colors they can possibly find on themselves. No, I'm not about that kind of colorfulness, but I'm not about black and white, because I'm going to find it at some point enormously boring. Also in childhood, usually I plugged into black color like I never saw it in my life before. Once I noticed it, it was so hard to get out of it. I think it's also kind of in fashion. finally got out of it. I found it as very much as escape, not to be bothered what colors to put, just one color is settled. What I want to say, learning how to distance one color from another is important aspect, always will be. But things should never be going too much in one direction. I'm still, Africa is in Africa, Europe is in Europe. And everything that is in between will need to be properly charted. And so I have said it. When it comes to, do you know how to chart things? Do you know how to regulate things? Or you don't know? So if you don't know, don't apply for position. That is where we are today. Ladies and gentlemen. Just to add something, more of an insight on downplaying gorgeous people. Nothing of that is accidental. Actually, the point is that let's call them high genetic caliber people would be also targeted in terms, would be more like being on the market and who is going to pay more money for playing the partnership. I think that today things went that far that is everything going like on some kind of market, on some kind of trading billboard, like who is going to pay more or something like that. It is like when you're selling horses from your horse yard, and that is where I'm going to find monarchies now. So you see how different approach of Olymp, which I am delivering here from my gardening approach of gardening a nation and making a nation or building a nation. Then you talk culture, education, behavior, protocols, or everything I talk about. Or when it happens that you end up being like holding horses in your horse yard, in your horse house, and trading them out there for money. It is completely different approach. That is again where prime society will need to be noticed. Tribunal societies. This was not going to, of course, let out of leash neither Maoris or any other prime society. And people continue to be fascinated by aligning with these people. I just can't understand how can a person with spirit of 21st century, with such kind of cultural valuation of 21st century, end up to be so unresponsibly attracted by such very serious events that require very serious management. But you jump there as a flamboyant or something. It's not responsible. And you're deciding on behalf of the entire civilization how much you really can go with your sense of adventurous spirit here. When we are deciding on behalf of the entire civilization. It's not just what you like. It is about how it should be. It is about to understand what are the problems, what are the associated issues. It's not about you making a wish list or you having your preference. It is about that we all together today are paying attention to certain events rather than deciding on your behalf. I mean, on behalf of the entire planet. And as much as it was about, also I pointed out, they bring some genetics. Should I say also what they're excavating, which is not exactly their genetics. They cannot be appreciated for what they're excavating because it is not theirs to claim. And to the extent that their genetics would be also marketed, Let's notice it is planetary issue. And let's notice, in order to deal with it, we need to get out of the previous, out of the past. We need to get into regulative, not to try to prevent it and to undermine it. Also, it takes what it takes to develop certain properties, DNA properties, within certain kind of acceptable civilizational, cultural normative. And usually you need solid driver. And there's different kind of culture, right? So you need to bring Maoris, for example, in Europe or in some kind of ancient plateau in order to get something out of it that will be measurable by European standards, right? So it's not just, maybe you would say they are going to share the profit now. You see, we can't think about these matters like that. Simply you have to bring yourself in 21st century. We live all in 21st century. You're all members of government out there. You have to enclose. You all know what is law and order now. You're all educated in legislative thinking. We need to bring these matters forward. In summary, as again, I was talking too much. But I guess equally when you attend universities, like you spend half of a day just because they're just elaborating on matters. Yet, in summary, this is legal case. I'm bringing it in United Nations. It is not point two. I can't stack too much with Olymp. It's too much imaginary. It is actually United Nations already. It is going to bring us a sense of the entire world rather than half of a world, which usually you end up thinking when it is Olymp. Although Olymp does have advantage because it brings in perspective strong in a stronger manner, I would say, what is the main wrongdoing, and that is Central Imperial bloodline, which also become today a reason to drive everything in direction of increasing the cake that is about to be shared. Rather than solving the problem, someone is trying to make the problem bigger. Maybe if you are sitting somewhere in Olymp and see everything falling on your head, maybe you will end up being more responsible. I'm not sure. However, there is a reason why Olymp continues to be distinctive than United Nations. That is ability to bring attention to main subject as a matter of its own troubleshooting. In United Nations, you get diluted from the mainstream subject. Next, we pointed out how far it is getting really everything worse than better. Nations continue to speak increasingly about trading, although it becomes more than clear we're talking about trading people. Certain nations ended up to be stuck into it. I'm going to especially alarm to more centralized nations as it is Russia and China that continue to increasingly speak about trading and looks as they're caught genius in the bottle rather than really that much willing to insist on the trading. Undoubtedly, these are growing economies, and part of growing economy is about trading. Always was about trading, one would say. Even entire West civilization developed majorly on the base of trading, although lately become industrial revolution actually, and then financial revolution, which somehow returns to resources. I'm going to find therefore three manifestations, three main fields where extreme behavior on the planet continue to be manifested. And we need to pay attention. And that is a globalistic approach based on solely economic development and insisting on economic development, it is basically harassing the humanity itself. It is based on trading humanity and trading off the value systems and the legal systems by which we measure our civilization and our sense of safety and security. They do not work with political standards and what measure our safety, but what measure their perception of the world. It becomes over-centralized equally as any kind of political regime, just it is centering on the substance of money rather than substance of regime. In substance, they end up to be regimes equally because they drive on centralized power. Second aspect is using kids, recruiting small kids, that is mostly immigrant-related approach, but also mixed bloodlines-related approach, and using therefore one good percentage of enslaving one good percentage of population, enslaving one good percentage of population. Closely related here will be category of population that would be detected as a horses that would end up being so intensively followed and invested and manipulated, ultimately would end up being manipulated, that becomes on its own something that is rather closer to enslaving people than engaging them as decision making, as the power centers of their own. It has become for some period of time the way how history become driven, using the leaders as disposable horses and valuing the one that are driving the horses or driving the engine, controlling things rather than being the event. Here is again to be or not to be of Shakespeare. And here is again what means to the legend of Excalibur, because it is a reference to holding someone or having hold on something rather than being something. You see, it took Shakespeare down there in England to pop up the question, what it is all about here. Is it about to be, or is it about to control the one that is? And that's a very serious event, actually. Whenever you have charismatic people, that there are that many people racing, who is going to get hands on it first and control the situation, rather than to wait to be governed. And that's the nature of man. There is only one event when they lay as a dead bodies. That is when they visit a doctor, an ambulance. That is the only authority they recognize and not any other. I was supposed to be very calm when I was about to say this comment. So imagine it happening with calm voice. Save me some time of redoing all of this. Third category of issues that we need to deal with is the political field itself, that on its own would have certain obviously range where we need to pay attention how things are going to end up being manifested, what kind of interface we are going to end up using, and not to end up being downrighted as a political protocol because we have not been careful how we are going to drive certain events. As I have said, there is a very fine line between Nazism, fascism, or nationalism. And that is where I'm going to focus my examination today. What makes difference between healthy nationalism, to which we are all determined because it rounds up on certain cultural and value systems, on certain identity-driven protocols. And equally as we cannot give up on the protocol personal integrity, although it seems on that street you have forgotten that something like that even exists. Let's decide how to play it or to appreciate it in other people. It is not about that you can walk over another person. It is about should you be walking over another person and still thinking of yourself as of integrity. Because criminals do not have integrity. Equally as the one that is being violated. Oh yeah, that is why they are using disposables. Or they would call that in military industry munition. You know, it is equally offensive also when actually military industry are using, attaching names of their tanks. And there's going from thank you in English, I can imagine. Can you imagine from thank you, they're going to military industry development of rhetoric as tank. Or the name they put even on the name of the tank. I noticed it is there is a category of tanks that are having a name bread. I mean, excuse me. We're talking about American military industry. That is how this recklessness is going on. It's very hard not to develop into some kind of Nazism and fascism. If you want to respond to that, it's very easy to jump in boots of Germany. And I continue to believe the Germans found themselves in last century in these boots because they have been offended, very offended. And they stood there in the name of their defending their integrity as a nation. But ended to be how it is. Then they have been they noticed certain pattern in behavior. In previous centuries, I'm going to say again, the entire Europe was occupied by Jewish capital, literally occupied by Jewish capital. And what Germans have done, but no one is daring to say, that they liberated entire Europe, including Russians. Russians are not going to admit that as well. Liberated entire Europe from the chains of Jewish financial protocol, of Jewish financial occupation. Germans liberated Europe in last century from chains of Jewish financial occupation. Americans not, and that is why Americans are today where they are. Because Americans are still, I don't know after BlackRock how much are still, but certainly while we're in charge much more of Rothschilds have been in charge, America was very much in chains of Jewish capital. Now that capital is dirty capital because it is driving on everything that I have been pointing in my work as a wrongdoing, and that is either using resources, principal historic houses, as it is pointing out principal imperial monarchical bloodlines of Macedonian imperial heritage. Either we are talking about the Jesus bloodline in general, that is that imperial bloodline that is happening here within the percentage of population as we talk millenniums of time passing by. Trading of people, trading of kids, violating women, targeting women in a lifetime, stigmatizing women. That was all associated with the primary initial emission of capital. Germans realized what's going on and they decided to step up. What I want to point out is how you can lose although you were supposed to win. If you are not careful, how you are going to fight the battle. Bring it in a legal house will make much more sense. Fact is that Germans cannot restrain themselves from becoming nothing better than the one that they have been fighting. It become more like one gang dealing with another gang than dealing with the actual situation. What I'm doing here is dealing with the actual situation. I'm not playing gang, I'm playing tempo. It's easier for me, of course. But it takes what it takes to bring this forward. But I wanted to point out these are all political subjects that exist in political arena and will need to be dealt with in political arena. So let's polarize, let's categorize our issues in few categories so we can handle them easier. First category, unrestrained. Therefore, unrestrained, globalistic economic development, no question asked. Where most of the political platforms are getting there. Politics is not supposed to sound like that. Politics cannot sound like that. When you see politics speaking like that, something wrong is happening there. Second category is slavery, tribunal societies and slavery, and tribunal society wisdomry in building slavery out of kids, which has been tradition upon which entire monarchical protocol in Britannia, for example, has been building up, which is bringing us closer, zooming closer to Britannia and prime societies of Britannia. Either the one that went there, or the one that are there, or combine efforts, whatever. They certainly didn't have problem to unite during my work on the back of this work out there in Britannia, especially England, jumping directly in Ireland on the back of my work, talking about what? Law and order, maybe? Or you are going to start with legal system, maybe? Or sitting in monarchy and stealing my work, and then we are going to unite with Ireland on legal system of 21st century. Of course, that was not about legal system. It was about gang cartel playing 21st century game, pretending they're not a gang. Because I'm here speaking, and I'm playing colors and forgetting to bring the boxes on my table properly, to remind me what I'm dealing with. That is therefore box number 2. The slaves, enslaved, and the slave owners. Box number 3, the political discussion on political format. Now, these are 3 different boxes. First, and they're all interconnected, of course. We are just trying to deal with the situation in much more organized manner. The first box and the last box are very much related. First box is economy without politics. Third box is the politics itself. Because in real terms, there is no such thing as economy without politics. There cannot be. Answering the last question, the last box, that is the political order, will need to solve and deal with all of the previous. Our political answers today should be sober and correct. And most importantly, they should be dealing with the issues I'm just presenting in front of you as a counseling office of United Nations. Do not tell me I have not told you. Do not tell me there is no such office just because you don't want to hear it. If you have heard it, well, then you have heard it. Office is there. Virtual reality or not, the office is there because you have heard these elaborations. And that's the office. There was coronavirus, so you learn to be virtually functioning. Well, consider this going in that category of virtual office. Is nothing less than office. Our political answers of today will need to be problem-solving oriented, or what that would be about. If you are not standing out there on top of your nation with the promise of legitimate legal state and legitimate legal civilization, then you should not be elected to begin with. That is how politics begins, with legitimacy of civilizational premise. A civilization walks ahead how it should walk ahead, not how it should not. But then it is civilization. Well, if it is not working properly, then it's not civilization. It is something else. How you can call civilization what civil is not? How you can possibly do that? It's impossible. You're trying to go around, play with words, hide around. As you can see, each new time is reducing your opportunity to hide behind. This discussion certainly diminished most of your excuses for legitimate leadership. It is hard work now ahead of you as a nation to restructure upon this work and bring your faces, your political faces, forward, prepared for the new time, rather than walk as old granny out of the time. I'm sorry, it's not personal. I'm using it in philosophical reference. Living in your time is not just designing modern houses. It is also designing modern political systems. And as long as gangs continue to surface the rest of the people, nothing is there modern, but the most anarchical and archaic than it possibly can be. Returning of mafias on the top stage of the planet is not walking the times. It cannot qualify as walking the times. Today you don't invite me in Europe as a tourism protocol. Well, I deliver this level of analysis. And like you're on the top of the game or you're on the top of the times. Excuse me, guys, but you are not. You can't call me in the office, but you're calling me in tourism industry. And you're to top up the times as Europeans. I think this is rather failure of Europe than Europe topping up the times. It is rather Europe failed. I'm in my 60s and you are going to invite me in tourism industry? What I'm here to promote longevity of the old elderly population? Or living forever? Or I was supposed to introduce my political work. In this age of our lives, a woman would expect to be recognized professionally. If you have heard, and if you have managed to notice a woman somewhere in Europe, then you should know how to talk to a woman as well. Europeans, you have failed. And yes, that is going to include Britain. And nothing is going to surprise me that this kind of fiascos are still happening, because it just confirms that really my statement that this planet has not noticed a woman yet. I mean, to notice one thing is one step, just then to understand that second step. We are yet, if we manage to get to the first step, and that is this planet to finally notice a woman. But then we have to wait until they understand a woman. Or that's going to go on that much of a time. And I'm afraid I wouldn't like to think that my office or my holidays are going to depend on this kind of clarifications by humanity. So I'm going to ask, my question of humanity for humanity of today is, have you actually noticed a woman so far? And how far you have managed to understand a woman? I just a few minutes ago was following up on Instagram and noticing they made list of successful men and measure the success of a man. And in each of these successes, a woman is just an ambience, of course. No one single success in the list of successful men have been enclosed as a matter of successful woman. Should be successful man and successful woman, actually, rather. But when women manage to get out of problems and troubles, that woman become stigmatized. There's a problem here with men and a woman on this planet. If you're too much around, making too much attention of yourself, it is not enough, even a woman. You just need to set your head down and just accept the drive. And if someone is going to see you as an old horse, then you accept to be old horse. Even if you are counseling the planet. There is here a couple of issues that will need to be therefore clarified in regard of that particular event, which I'm going to set in category of political leadership. Because politics usually go with expression socio-political. Socio-political. Undoubtedly, politics is going to be measurement of social and cultural development. It's not going to stand out of nothing. Politics is about society. Politics is about culture. Politics is about progress and how we measure progress. So I'm going to enclose this event of me being denied as a woman in last category of political issues. As much as it is cultural issue, in this case scenario, it is political issue. Because it is woman in politics. About woman in politics as well. And here, of course, although I'm using very often Hillary Clinton as an example, I'm afraid that Hillary also become very much involved too much within Monica Lewinsky situation, which was the reason why I found myself in the shadows of this entire event, and how that is all of this started exactly from that a woman-driven event, actually. And here it was probably a woman versus a woman situation where it happened, this kind of conflicting situation. Although America versus Yugoslavia does have its own weight, and certainly brings variety, entire palette of players on the field. I'm going to notice the size of political reasons adequately, and what I really needed to deal today with while pulling out Olymp entirely all by myself. Still noticing a woman continue to be excused for people to go away and continue to go away with any kind of responsibility and continue to be in preference of sleeping under the tray than dealing with the situation. Especially if they are not the one that would be participating in the event. They would prefer to bring entire humanity with them in the sleeping mode than to go with the answers. That is how far a manhood is ready today to fight a woman. And that is how far a woman is ready to fight another woman. I am aware that at this stage politicians have noticed me enough, but I have absolutely no idea how to, I don't know what is a bit more of a hardship for them, to incorporate me or to actually disregard me. I think here the weight is perfectly balanced. As much as I'm very sure they have become audience to this work, that would obviously remind them that they are in audience. And I can imagine no politician would be happy with such description, no matter how obvious it has become. Apart of the fact that lack of capacity to incorporate me would be their minus, as nobody else's minus, rather. But my ultimate question here happens to be how far politics can be today measured exclusively by being elected, selected, or voted by someone, or it cannot happen. First of all, this is a work of political philosophy, not, and certainly is not seeking some kind of executive political office. But even as work of political philosophy, obviously it takes time because it does have elements of scientific approach. It takes time, obviously, until it can actually land. I can certainly think about it as some kind of excuse, unless my work has been employed already on the ground. Just the protagonists are not properly on the ground themselves. So when you each time reach the comment of not being properly elected, would you be also having on mind the fact that my work is already on the ground? Would you keep in mind that as well before you continue to talk about election? Because obviously my work has been elected already by all mainstream of politicians of the planet, and all mainstream of mega players of the planet. And that is not election. I don't know what election can possibly be. So I think we should be employing another method here. If your podcast has been attended by solid amount of audience, although not enclosed exactly by the software, being in this case scenario YouTube, which of course would be explainable with the fact that YouTube is privately owned company. And to the extent that noticing the size of my cloud, I don't feel like wasting time searching for alternative. My question will need to confront the planetary backyard entirely as it is and bring this question forward. Would it not be the numbers of followers to my work be qualifying for electorate in 21st century when we have this new event of someone's admission? Therefore, by being listened to accordingly. I'm asking, would it not be qualifying for election? I'm asking the relevant political authorities. Because what I talk here is political philosophy, not some kind of entertainment music for relaxation or something. I'm presenting political philosophy. So, would be numbers of audience that I have, would it not be qualifying for electorate? I would like politicians of the active political quadrant today to kindly answer to this question. As much as I continue to be troubled by the work itself, and someone said, your work should be Steve Jobs, right? Said, if your work is what you enjoy, then you're the happiest man or woman on the planet. In my case scenario, although it looks like a singing bird, which is a ultimate charting of someone's identity rather than pleasure done, the question would be accordingly. I'm kind of hanging on with my work on daily basis. Are you not going to find that a bit inappropriate? Political subjects? That would be your second question for today. As the houses of historic heritage on which you are still willing to call upon, as I can notice, are full out of references to various barons. We are not up to Tudors today, we are up to the Blackbird of England. I mean, I'm just reminding English grounds what we're dealing with here today. And would it not be therefore up to the grounds to provide their most correct answers, including walking per the historic heritage charting? What I'm asking England, since the bird is already singing, are we not going to provide a working place for it rather than leisure platform? And so England is to speak. I'm not going to let anyone out of the leash on the historic heritage premises. We have history of Blackbird. It's time to answer to me, since I can't stop talking on daily basis. Are we really talking about bird here, or we are talking about something else? Britannia, to answer the question, please. We don't have time to waste here. I'm after my working rooms. Britannia, to answer my question. And you next time invite me on your territory, pay attention not to be for leisure purposes or purposes of tourism. Well, we are all aware that we are talking about Blackbird protocol, all the way to Central Europe and beyond. Central Europe. Britannia, to answer the question. I won't go that far to New Zealand, to be honest, if I need to stop by somewhere in Serbia and Balkan and notice Olymp for all of the reasons why someone is going to invent house in Switzerland as it goes, along with the history. So, Britannia, we are not talking Tudors today, redhead Tudors. We are talking Blackbird. Britons, we have a question for today. Am I going to continue to hang with my work on daily basis here, since I can't stop doing it, obviously? Since a wheel starts wailing, you can't stop it, obviously. And the wind is nicely on place. So, Britons of wind industry, you have your question for today.